Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Liebmann, CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail, and this is Future Shop. This is where I talk to innovators, disruptors, and iconoclasts about the future of retail. Today, my guest is Claudia Lloreda. She is the founder and general manager of Blush Bar. It is an amazing pink, happy, beauty specialty retailer based in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. She'll tell you more about that. Welcome, Claudia.
Delighted to be here, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I should tell everybody that when I first saw Claudia recently, it was in Miami at Cosmoprof, the major beauty expo, and she was on a panel of experts talking about beauty and beauty retailing in Latin America and South America. It was extraordinary. Her exuberance, her passion for what she does just grabbed my attention. And so I figured we better have her on to talk about all the things she knows from all sides of the world of beauty. It's interesting to me knowing some of your background, very US-based education, working in the US, and then going home and opening a beauty shop. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you actually got where you are today.
Well, it's delightful to be here. My journey really begins with the women in my life, my mother and my two grandmothers. I grew up with, two grandmothers who had beautiful boudoirs and red lipstick and powder and perfumes on there. And I remember climbing on and, applying everything when I was just a little girl. So I have always loved beauty. I think it's an amazing category. Everyone can use beauty products. So I absolutely have loved it. Professionally, I actually did investment banking for 2 years, and I spent 6 years at McKinsey, most of them in New York. It was a wonderful experience because it made me very analytical. I worked mostly with banks. I was definitely in the wrong industry, but I learned a ton at McKinsey, and have a lot of respect for my time there. And then miraculously in 2005, I got my dream job at the Estee Lauder companies. I joined the corporate strategy team. I remember arriving in that 40th floor lobby with Estee Lauder blue and just thinking I was in heaven. I was so delighted to be there. I spent 8 years in total at the Estee Lauder companies, 4 in the corporate strategy team, working across all brands. That's when we met many years ago. And then I spent 3 years at Clinique as global head of marketing for makeup and fragrance, working under Lynn Green and Agnes Landau, who were incredible, extraordinary mentors. And at that time, I am originally Colombian, even though I am a US citizen. My husband and I had 2 very young babies. The grandmothers were saying, why aren't you here? I want to have the baby nearby. And we made the decision to return home to Bogota, Colombia, where we are originally from. Having these 2 young babies, I really wanted to find a way to work from home. It's as simple as that. I wanted to be home for my kids. And so I set about kind of building this business plan for Blush Bar. This was around 2013 and 2014. I was still working with Estee Lauder on a part-time basis, writing their brand books. And I really began to see this, beautiful pink store, very feminine, very clean, very warm and kind, a pink, happy place with my favorite brands. We're a small store. I never imagined a big store, and our store format to this day will continue to be small stores around 70 square meters, around 800 square feet, and a very personalized experience. And so I started building Blush Bar back then. And here we are, 9 years later. We're about to be 9 years, September 1st, which was when we opened our doors in 2015. We will close 2024 with 53 stores, 10 in Mexico, 23 in Chile, and 20 in Colombia. So it's been an incredible journey.
You know, it's interesting. We've had on this podcast in some wonderful retailers, and in the beauty space, we've had Joe Horgan, who founded Mecca in Australia, and Mally Bernstein, who now is the head of Blue Mercury in the US. And the passion, the personal passion for beauty and creating a unique experience for shoppers is consistent across the three of you, and it certainly makes me smile. I did say to Claudia before we started that we should have. I thought I should wear pink today. For those of you who aren't only listening, can't see, we're both in black and white or black, and I was like, oh my heavens, I should have worn pink. So anyway, tell us about who the target customer is for Blush Bar.
So our shopper is really a younger consumer, millennial and Gen Z, and that's who we are razor focused on, even though everyone, of course, is welcome at Blush Bar, and we have a very welcoming kind of value for everybody. So, she is digitally obsessed. She derives all of her information from her friends and from social media. She is very influenced by influencers. She is very influenced by TikTok and Instagram in particular. And she loves this category. She is looking at the US brands and knowing, exactly what's launching and wants to have it now. She's just so informed. So we find that that's one side of her, but she also, which is very interesting, and I think contrasts sometimes with the US, she wants assistance. She wants classes. She wants to sit down and figure out what is right for her skin. So that's why we offer 25 makeup and skincare and brow, everything classes in our stores, because she also wants to be informed. She derives her information from social media, but when she's in store, she wants to try everything on and make sure she loves it. I also think the other very interesting trend we've been seeing in the last 9 years is daughters bringing their mothers to discover Blush Bar with them. In I remember when my mom took me to the Clinique counter at Burdines, to buy my Clinique 3-step when I was 13. And here it's the reverse. It's the mother saying to me, oh my God, I just discovered the best brow product from my daughter, who's 15 or 18 or 16. So it's been a delightful kind of, we continue to focus on this younger consumer, even though, of course, we welcome everyone. And I think that focus makes us very efficient. We design our stores so that they're full of beautiful details. We have a pink bunny. That's our mascot. This is like pink. Yeah. So she's now getting overalls. This is version 1. And this year we're launching her with overalls. She was my favorite toy when I went to school in New York as a young girl. So the bunny is kind of our mascot. So we fill the store, with tons of details that appeal to the younger consumer. Our pink bag is meant to be elegant, simple, cute, very recognizable. It has a bow. So, I think since we know she is our consumer, we align our brand portfolio, our service portfolio, our experience, our communications, our social media to her. And it makes us very efficient.
Yeah. So what competition was there in Bogota when you opened your first store, which I think is incredibly brave, opened your first store in 2015? Where were these young women going for their beauty products?
So, Wendy, it was very scary to launch. It still is scary to have a startup. I'm always scared. It is a permanent state of scared. But, at the time, the reason for Blush Bar was really that the dominant players were department stores
Mhm.
and traditional perfumeries. So what I saw in the market was a very heavy focus on fragrance. Fragrance was 90% of the market,
Mhm.
and zero focus on makeup and skincare, especially new brands. So at the time, Too Faced, or, brands that were up and coming, we're talking about 2015. None of the brands like Too Faced or Smashbox or any of, those cool up and coming brands were present in the market. It was mostly this, classic traditional brands, which we need in our stores.
Mhm.
But I saw this opportunity to innovate the store experience, to focus, to create a store that was pink and happy, where everybody else was large. The formats of these perfumeries were large and heavily focused on fragrance. So I went with the reverse. I went with almost no focus on fragrance. I think fragrance is around 3% of our business, very
Mhm.
tiny. And makeup and skincare are the dominant share of our business. Everyone told me, you're going to fail. You will fail because Latin America is a fragrance market.
Mhm.
And no, like, of course, Latin America is a fragrance market, and there's excellent retailers who address
Yeah.
that fragrance market, like the department stores, and the traditional perfumeries. But we wanted to bring specialty multi beauty, cross-trained advisors, excellent brand portfolio, niche brands, and big brands. So we have MAC, Clinique, Estee Lauder, of course, but we also have Sol de Janeiro, The
Mhm.
Ordinary, Anastasia, Milk Makeup, Pixie Beauty. And we're always on the lookout for wonderful new brands.
When you thought about your experience in the US, I mean, I was trying to think when you were describing the Blush Bar experience
Mhm.
that yes, we see younger shoppers, younger beauty consumers who go to shop in a Sephora or an Ulta or in department stores and things. But I don't really think about a beauty experience in this market that is focused solely on the consumer as shopper that you're talking about. Did what you saw in the US frame up the opportunity?
I spent so many years in the US, as you noted. My education was in the US. All my, first jobs were in the US. I think where, what I learned in the US market was, the size and scale of these markets is just, it's so different. Colombia is a very small market in comparison. So is Chile. Mexico is obviously
Right.
much bigger. But I think what drove the focus was more that we were a startup. And when you are a startup, you have very limited resources. I raised original money was like me with a little basket, asking people for, $5,000,
Pink basket.
pink basket for sure, but it was a little basket. So I think we had such small resources that we had to just be very focused. It was more out of need. We couldn't advertise in magazines or newspapers, which were still, important conduits at the time for communication. So we built social media. We grew our social media community because that was the only thing we could afford. So I think that focus came, from you just need, you had limited resources. I desperately wanted my stores to be pink. Like they just had to be pink. I love pink. It made it now in retrospect, it was a great decision because it makes us very different versus the other retailers in the market. But I think that focus on that younger consumer, who in turn has brought us her mother, and her mother loves us too, was happenstance. It wasn't by design. It was out of a need to be, have an efficient use of capital because retail requires so much capital. Go ahead.
Yeah. The other thing about that that's interesting to me is when you think about that opportunity and 10 years ago, early days of what I'm going to call social shopping, which by the way is my subject for Cosmoprof in Las Vegas, that early days of building a community, a direct messaging online, in the ether space. That was still pretty new 10 years ago, right? So talk about how that informed what you do today and how you use that community and social media, to engage and bring and keep your shoppers together and passionate about the business.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we act more as a brand first and
Mm-hmm.
then a retailer. And I think that comes from my time at Lauder. At Lauder, I learned, being on brand in your visuals, your communication, everything was, so much about the brand. And so we have built Blush Bar first, so consumers recognize our bunny, our pink stores, our pink bag. And that community that we built in 2015, we have built through extremely personal storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So our entire team is on our social media. We talk about all sorts of different things. Like, it's not just product or newness that, a brand is launching. We have a pet adoption program. So we partner with, we have this beautiful pink tuk-tuk and a beautiful pink van, which I have some pictures and we can share. And so what we do is we partner with foundations who rescue animals, and we have a pet adoption program. So why do we have that? Because it builds community and love outside of our love for makeup or skincare. We have a recycling program because our consumers, absolutely care about recycling and not feeling as wasteful with, obviously, the beauty industry has a lot of waste. So we have a recycling program. So we've built this community by personal storytelling. My dog is all over our social media. So are my team's dogs. They know our names. We always talk about female empowerment, the fact that we're founded by a woman, created for women. 95% of our leaders are women, and 90% of our company is women. So I think we've built storytelling that, yes, of course, we talk about our products and our brands and the beauty benefits, but we also speak beyond that. We speak about recycling. We speak about mental health. We do Zooms, around mental health, around facial yoga, around kind of finding your purpose. So I think we've expanded the topics that we cover with our community in order to engage them, and on the basis of what they want. We constantly ask them, what content would you like to see? So, if we do a Bridgerton look, it's because the community said, I want the Penelope glow up or whatever.
Right.
So I think it's just listening to this consumer, and social media allows you, for years, I am the inbox of our Instagram and TikTok. Like, when you are saying, my product didn't work, I don't like it, like I'm answering,
It's you.
saying it's
Yeah.
me, and I'm listening. And that has been, incredibly valuable to
Yeah.
define
Yeah.
this community and unify our customers together.
So I know from originally talking to Joe Horgan from Mecca, I mean, I clearly see the impact of Lauder around the world, because I know it was much because Leonard Lauder said, it's okay, we'll let you sell those brands for us in Australia, because it was very much, it was a department store market or a pharmacy, drugstore, but elevated drugstore market. Thank you, Leonard, for all of those things, right? But when you think about that, the challenge of now being the I don't know, curator's a much overused word, but the home for all of these brands, and the work you do as a leader to bring those companies to you in Bogota or Mexico City, or in Chile. How challenging has that been?
It's still challenging. I
Mm.
mean, so what you said about Mr. Lauder, to me, he is my hero. He is the most pivotal person that I have ever had the opportunity, the honor to interact with. So
Mhm.
I am my heart is very blue still meaning Estee Lauder Blue, because I learned so much at
Right.
such a fantastic company. So could not agree more. It's always been a struggle to bring brands to our markets because our markets are small. Our GDP per capita is small. Chile, has 3 times the GDP per capita of Colombia, but we're still, Latam is always, a small portion of the world. And there are so many other markets that are quite large. So what we've done, first, we had Estee Lauder believe in us, and that's why we were able to open our stores, because exactly what you said, like literally without Clinique, without Estee Lauder, without MAC, we would not have been able to recruit, other new brands to join Blush Bar. And nowadays, it's still a struggle. I'd say it's a struggle because understanding Latam sometimes is viewed as scary, meaning there's, political uncertainty or economic unrest, etc. But we now have a lot more scale, and a lot more of a track record to show brands. One of the biggest hurdles is regulatory. Basically, our markets are very regulated, and we need product registrations to import into Chile and Colombia. And that is a process that takes time, on the brand side. So that's a barrier. And I think it's just, what we do as Blush Bar is we say, we are your little affiliate in these markets. So we do all the branding. We work with brands as a brand would like, total respect for their creativity, for their assets. But for years, it was very hard. It was me, again, with my pink basket, begging for brands in the US, for sure.
Yeah. So you went from Bogota to Mexico City next? Was that your second
Chile?
opening? Oh,
No, it was Chile.
So why Chile, and then why Mexico?
Perfect. So, the first 4 years of Blush Bar were focused on Colombia, and we reached 10 doors in Colombia. We then understood how we work, like what kind of store design we need, how much capital we need, all of that. And in 2019, we welcomed a private equity fund from Argentina into our investor base. And I presented a plan where I wanted Chile for many reasons. Chile is 3 times the GDP of Colombia. It's a very sophisticated retail market. The department stores in Chile, the pharmacies in Chile are amazing. So best in class retail execution. And lastly, I had a dear friend from Clinique who also worked at L'Oreal, who I just knew had to be our general manager. So there was also a touch of Christian Fontesilla can roll this out for us and can do this. And we can test the hypothesis of whether we can export the Blush Bar concept. We launched in November of 2019. 3 months later, we had to shut everything down because the pandemic hit. But it was fortuitous because the pandemic allowed us to find incredible retail locations. So our locations in Chile are exceptional. And we opened 10 doors between 2020 and 2022 in Chile. And now Chile is bigger than Colombia. We'll close with 23 stores, 8 in Santiago, but many outside of, in smaller cities, Concepcion, Talca, Chillán, Viña. And the success was tremendous. We immediately performed well. And it was the same Blush Bar consumer, young, passionate, social media driven. And we're delighted to have part of our business be in Chile. And then Mexico. So when we continued to receive investment from our private equity fund in Argentina, and we looked at the map, our objective is to be a pan-Latam retailer. So we will be probably opening Peru in a year. Peru is in a really important market. But Mexico for us was the biggest challenge we've ever faced. Mexico is enormous. The competition is tremendous. The biggest specialty multi-retail players are present in Mexico. But we see the Mexican consumer as very similar to the Colombian consumer. She wants to be apapachada, which means taken care of, loved in store. She's a very, very, service-driven consumer. So we thought our stores are efficient, they're small, we're nimble, we can be in many cities, we can open many doors quickly. We don't need a large scale format. And we've been delighted with our performance in Mexico. As I said, we'll close the year with 10 doors in Mexico, in different cities, not all in Ciudad de Mexico, in Mexico City. And we're just really proud of being able to join such an incredible market with so much growth opportunity.
As I think about what you were saying, as you know, we are so shopper focused and understanding who that person focused, but understanding who that person is. And that, again, the thing that intrigued me, as you said, very focused on this younger woman. It's so interesting to me when I think about that service proposition, when I think about the US market, the challenges of service, challenges of hiring people who are passionate. They might be passionate about, I think the early days of MAC, the MAC makeup artists were so passionate. You always wanted to go in and say, no, wait a minute, how do I do that? How do I, whatever? But not necessarily that experience in lots of other places where people can go. I think we undervalue service, but also younger people wanting service and experience. So when you look at the US market and you think about it now from this, your newer, more recent perspective, what do you see as opportunities here, particularly in those markets with larger, younger, perhaps Latin, Hispanic populations? Where do you see opportunities here? I don't mean for Blush Bar necessarily, but as a business growth opportunity.
I think it's all, so in my experience these years with retail, it's all about aligning the store and on a store by store basis with the demographic that's around the store. So, in heavily Hispanic areas, I think, we are Latina at heart, in spirit, everything. And we always make sure that our consumer feels seen and heard and listened to. So I think staffing, store managers and makeup artistry staff that is bilingual, Spanish speaking, and really has that sense of what is the look that this Hispanic woman or Latina woman is looking for, is really important. Product mix is really important, ensuring that you have the right foundation shades, the right corrector shades, concealer shades. So important. And the communication, I think the communication does need to be tiered to local relevance. And that's what we've learned very much with our presence in Mexico, in Chile, and in Colombia, is while we are communicating the same Blush Bar DNA, we are communicating it differently to those consumers because there are local relevance preferences. In Chile, you wouldn't talk about oily skin. You would talk about hydration because Chilean women have drier skin because of the climate. Whereas in Colombia, no one has dry skin and everyone wants oil control. So I think it's a matter of, the consumer wants to be listened, heard. She wants to be treated with kindness. And that is the hardest thing to do in retail because retail is tough. You have people that are working very long hours. They're on their feet. Sometimes, a client comes in and, you're having a personal issue, but it's inspiring our staff in store to place the consumer at the center of everything. And I always say at Blush Bar, we built this business, click by click, consumer by consumer, sitting one woman on a chair by one woman. It's tiny. It's, it's very, very granular how we've built this business. So we can't fail any single consumer ever. You know what I mean? So it's been quite a journey, quite difficult.
You made me think about two things in that conversation. One, when you talk click by click, and you've talked a lot about social media and the community and the personalization of that. When you look at the business, the e-commerce business, I mean, what is that? What is the mix of business when you think about e-commerce versus in-store? And is it the same shopper? Is it different?
It's a very good question. So e-commerce is our number one store in all of the markets. E-commerce represents around 20% of the business in Colombia, around 25 to 30% in Chile. Mexico, we're still, we've been around for 5 months, so we're still kind of figuring out that number. But e-commerce, first of all, of course, saved us during the pandemic. Thank goodness we had, perfectly working e-commerce and warehouses and logistics. Or we wouldn't be around speaking right now. E-commerce is so important because it lets us, talk to that community that Blush Bar has in maybe a faraway city where, we just can't have a store, like a brick and mortar store. So she feels every time we say we send you to any corner of Colombia, people are happy. They feel included, even if they live in a small village or a small town. So e-commerce is really important. We also reflect the Blush Bar experience in e-commerce very much. So every e-commerce box receives a personalized note saying, "You're a ray of sunshine," or something positive, something lovable in handwritten form. We send 5 stickers. We send little pins, like these pins I'm wearing. We always, all our e-commerce orders are in our pink bag. We often have QR codes so that a person can, you bought X eyeshadow palette, here's a look, so that you can, replicate, the Bridgerton look with this eyeshadow palette. So we try to mirror the love, the kindness, and the knowledge or the expertise that we have in makeup and skincare in the e-commerce experience. And I think e-commerce will continue to be the most important doors for us. We're now investing a lot more money in digital advertising. We're linking, everything that we can link together with social media and digital advertising and CRM. We're doing it. And I think, it's certainly the future, but in our markets, the store experience is still irreplaceable. That conversation in store, trying on the red lipstick, seeing if you love it, happens in store in this category. And physical stores, brick and mortar stores, give us credibility with the consumer because they realize that we're an authorized retailer, that, we're, legally importing all goods into the market. I mean, there's a whole gray market that happens in our market. So brick and mortar will still be very important, I think, in the next few years.
Yeah. The other thing you sparked in my thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about when we were in Miami for the Cosmoprof event, we also led one of our retail safari tours where we had a group of visitors. We looked at retail in Miami, and they were a mixture of people from various parts of Latin America as well as the US. And what struck me is, you think about the size of the Latin Hispanic community in a city like Miami, and you walk around, an amazing mall like Brickell in Miami, and you do absolutely see the preponderance of, single fragrance retailers that you would never see in any other city in the world, in the US rather. What struck me, however, on the opposite side of that was it felt like that was almost the only nod to the more Hispanic shopper in that market. I just felt like they were missing something in terms of the other needs of the Hispanic shopper.
I mean, I think Miami is certainly a gateway of Latin America. You're constantly hearing Spanish and Portuguese, very, very honest. I think there's a Latina message that appeals to all of these consumers from the various countries. And I don't know enough about Miami retail to kind of give you a really educated answer. But to me, the big learning is the consumer that I know in our markets, in Colombia, Chile, and Mexico, is different than the U.S. consumer. The U.S. consumer is more of a self-shopping consumer. She is already so knowledgeable it's rare that a US consumer wants to, have a makeup application. Our best-selling service is called the Makeup Party, and it's 5 girls, a makeup artist, and they go through and do an entire full face of makeup. And it's our best-selling service, and these young girls love it, and they can be in their 20s celebrating an engagement, or in their 30s celebrating a baby, or in their teens learning about makeup and skincare. So to me, it's all about what services you can offer to create a relationship with that consumer, whether it's your brow service or your makeup class, and give the consumer a reason to come back to a specific makeup artist. That to me is how we've built Blush Bar, by creating a strong link between our staff and the consumer. It's not impersonal. You're not just, putting a product in a basket and then go paying for it. You've had a service, her name, she knows your brows,
Well, and I think you said something wise, as you clearly always do, is that you really do, regardless of where you are, you really need to know your consumer and how they want to shop for the category, the experience, whether you're in, Miami, in the US, whether you're in anywhere in Latin America or South America, or whether you're in Europe or anywhere else. And I think you probably saw that in your life at the Estee Lauder companies, right? Because it's an extraordinary business around the world. And so trying to stamp the brand is the brand, but how you deliver that brand, market by market, is so often different in terms of the needs and desires of the consumer. So last question for you. What's next? In the general terms, what do you see as the next area, future, in terms of beauty in general, as an expert in beauty with a global perspective? And then what's next for Blush Bar?
My hypothesis is we are such an incredibly innovative industry. I just love that new brands pop up, every year with something new to say. So I am very grateful to be a multi-brand retailer, because I have an opportunity to bring those brands in. So I think small brands will continue to challenge, be disruptive, bring new ideas to the table. And I'm always on the lookout for small, up and coming, cool brands. And I think that trend will continue. Absolutely. I think technology will continue to play a stronger role in the in-store experience. We now have scanners where you can, scan your skin and match your foundation in all of our stores. And we'll be launching that to the end consumer, which will be, it's an interesting project to see, how she fares with a device that scans her skin at home. But I think technology will continue to be a partner, a complement to the experience, but never, I don't think the world's going to go, full AI in this category, because there's so much emotion in this category. There's love, emotion, color, so it's a very personal, very emotional category. So I am always on the hunt, on the prowl, looking at all brands that are, telling a different story and bringing them to Blush Bar. And then for Blush Bar, I think we take things day by day. We have a long-term view of the consumer, but we're very much a startup still. We're very much, we don't have a main office. We're a lean staff. It's mostly very young. Our leaders, our head of Mexico is 28 years old, and she's just a star. She's amazing. So I think for us, it's continuing to consolidate Colombia and Chile, as, a pink, happy place retailer that is very knowledgeable and expert with the coolest brands, but always a warm feeling in the store. For Mexico, we will roll out at least another 10 to 15 doors next year. So reaching kind of 25 to 40 doors as soon as possible and as fast as possible. And then there's so many other markets in Latam that we're still not in, Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Costa Rica. are tremendously interesting markets. So we're very focused on that. And I think the other place that we're focused on is our own private label brand. We have a blush bar brand, which has accessories. So, makeup bags and bunnies and brushes. We also have a, small kind of makeup line, but we're developing a skincare line based on Colombian ingredients that are innovative, for our consumer and for our market. So I think there's just lots of fun, amazing things that I'm so excited for. But we take things day by day, because we remain very humble. I think humility is the key to, knowing where you need to be, knowing where you came from, how hard it was to get here. But the future seems good.
Yeah, it definitely seems pink and fluffy, I think. I'm thrilled we could talk today. As I say, the passion you have for the business and for these young women, I can see bringing their mums into the stores, but these young women who find a place for themselves in this space, and not just in the external beauty, but the social aspects of it, and all the programs you do. Really it's an extraordinary story. So I give you great credit for being so bold and brave and pink. Thank you for joining me today. It is a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere very soon for a great cup of Colombian coffee.
Fantastic. Wendy, thank you so much. What a delight. I loved this conversation.
Thank you, Claudia. You have to have the shopper in your mind's eye always. I mean, to begin a business that identifies a gap, as she did, to think about how do you communicate with that consumer in your stores all the time, particularly a younger consumer. She talked about the power of the younger person bringing the older person into the store, that community of passion. And she talked about not only the digital proposition and the social aspect of building a brand, which we all know and see here so much now, but also the fact of the value-based proposition and all the work they do, which isn't only about the product, although clearly that's so important, but the value of having values that mean a lot to your shoppers. And I think all of those things bundled up together talked about, showed why she exudes a passion for this business. And I will say, as a last, when I mentioned earlier, when I think about Joe Horgan, who founded Mecca in Australia and New Zealand, and Mally Bernstein, who runs Blue Mercury here in the US, this extraordinary passion of women-led companies driving business in beauty is the thing that resonates with me. So more power to us. That's a view of the future from us today. So look forward to seeing you soon in the future. Cheers. Bye for now.